We recently completed an assignment in which you were to teach some aspect of transformative learning to a small group of people. To put yourself in that position where you had to consider what you wanted to teach and how you wanted to teach it, and find someone to teach it to. So in this assignment, it brings up challenges. Some people had challenges just getting people to teach. Some people had to get past their own idea themselves and to do it. Some people have been teaching a lot, and so it was not so much of a big deal. At the heart of this assignment, though, was to bring your awareness to yourself as a teaching person. What happens to my consciousness when I teach someone? What am I thinking about myself? What ideas or beliefs get in my way? What limitations seem to arise when I move into that process? All these elements of that experience reflect back to you how you're regarding your own consciousness. So, underlying this project, the teaching objective or outcome, was you learning more about yourself as a instrument of teaching, as a teaching presence. So there's the technical things about that, the obvious ones. And there are the dimensions of this that aren't so obvious. So I come back to presence. How are you present? What happens when you are really completely present? Or as I like to say it, presence. The presence of complete love. It's a fearless state. That's a state in which there's no fear. It's a state in which you are conscious that love is a dialogue with itself. So there's a reflexivity in which the inner love and the outer love are complicit, collaborating in creating an awareness, a human presence, a human spiritual presence. So that's the deepest aspect. There's a natural urge for this to occur within every human being. it's actually the essence of our primal nature, is to seek to actualize and become conscious in this way. And this is inside of everybody, so everybody's playing, all the unconscious levels are playing to resolve life in a way that brings us about. So that's the deepest intention. So all the lesser intentions are context, or in that context, they're contexted within that. So when you taught your class, you maybe thought it was this, you were frustrated with that, you became self-conscious of this, you became frustrated with that, this worked, that worked. Oh, you taught this piece of transformative learning. So consider that all those, regardless of how well they turned out or not, were serving a deeper purpose, and one in which we could practice coming into a relationship in which the natural state of our engagement with a dialogue to bring us all into a higher state of awareness, collaborative process of bringing all involved into a higher state of awareness, connection with self. One thing to remember in transformative teaching is that this is why one of the reasons presence is so important. See, it's what we're teaching consciously and intellectually and emotionally, and how we're articulating things to help assist people to understand and touch into things. And that sets up a context in which there's engagement, and in the presence, there's a transmission that comes through the presence. In other words, the unconscious is teaching something to the unconscious of the other far more rapidly than what we can realize. And it's possible because of the rapport and dialogue that we've developed through what we think we're teaching, or what we objectively are teaching. So when we come to teaching, understanding that there's a larger educational process occurring, we might say the universe is educating itself through our activity of teaching or leading. And that because we're doing what we're doing, this deeper level can occur. So, by the way, when we're fostering transformative learning, what we're involving ourselves in is a huge activity of all consciousness moving to a higher state of awareness, a higher state of complexity and intimacy. So as we build up our acuity of what is emerging in our presence, there's a sense of the emerging future. So that's where it emerges. It does that anyway, but when we're present, we can be aware of that. in the reflexivity of consciousness moving itself into process. We can be aware in that moment. So there's a learning that wants to take place. And when we remove our small agendas, can step out of the ego into a bigger presence, into this complete loving, we become a conscious facilitator of this emerging future, next future moment. We talk about being, and being move into doing, because it comes out of that presence, it comes out of that emerging future. It comes out of what's being called for. So if we be settled in our loving present with what is, in a true way, there's a emergence of a response to that, and that becomes the doing. It's much like riding a wave, moving with. So the more we deepen our awareness into, like dropping into our heart, deepening into that essential nature, and allowing the satisfaction of that, the wholeness of that, to anchor us in the moment. The more we practice engaging the transcendence of ourself, taking our awareness and reaching beyond the form into soul, and bridging that into our presence. We line up with and integrate with. The deeper movement of what wants to be. We become a collaborative agent in that process, no matter what we think we're doing. So that's the essential teaching, is that awakening into that consciousness. So when we're in a leadership position, whether it's running a business or an NGO or some community event, this becomes a opportunity for the deeper transformation into loving to occur. So how we regard the purpose of being the project, how we regard the mission of the organization, is essential to whether we're facilitating the learning of the loving, or whether we're facilitating the learning of fear and how to manipulate life to survive in the consciousness of fear. The things we like joy, love, security, peace, prosperity, those are best delivered through the loving and the wholeness. When we twist it over into the perspective of fear becomes adversarial, scarce, winners and losers, haves and have-nots. Becomes that kind of play. It's hard to run an organization with optimum prosperity if all the employees are just looking out for themselves, because that's all you're doing is the leader of the corporation is looking out for your high salary and your position. See, then that reflexively is instilled in the organization. So you are doing business and it is making a profit, but through the limitation of fear, it's costing somebody. In a funny sort of way, a lot of big corporations, perhaps, fracking is an example. For this company to make a profit, this group of people pays a price. You see. And there's a lot of laws set up that the poor people subsidize the rich people so they can be richer under the guise of, oh, this is business. And we made this, and this is the way it is. So with the transformational leader, the only thing we're teaching, or the thing we're teaching through everything, is love. And we're using everything to do it. From that perspective, we're in a vibrant, living relationship with all the stakeholders, from client to environment, to employee, to government. There's a wholeness to it because everything is considered. So we don't have to have ways to take from somebody else to get. So if everything is evaluated in terms of, is my inventing this, my taking this innovation, turning it into a product, marketing it, dealing with customer service, getting the resources to do it, is there a positive regard there? Am I honoring and respecting? Am I being sustainable? Am I being appreciative of the client? Am I in a service attitude with the product I'm doing? Am I considering all these things? When I look to myself, is my evolving into more loving my biggest payoff? See, then the financial payoff follows instead of being the governing thing. When getting this big salary becomes my goal, I move into a basis of fear because I won't get it. I move into lack, even though, well, how could you be in lack and have that high salary? Wanting that high salary is a statement of lack. There's supply. We want to be taken care of in the way we need it to be taken care of, but this is everybody's goal. So we need to honor that so that all of them work. All of them get there. Otherwise, there'll be some kind of, in the reflexive relationship, you'll be undermined. The employees will undermine you, your customers will undermine you. There'll be unintended consequences in nature. So as a transformational leader, the orientation is teaching love. Sometimes that's said, letting love lead. Some people may hear this and immediately move into lack. Oh, how could I possibly be worthy of that? Am I big enough for that? What will people think? Can I just tell them that? You could do this without even using the word love to somebody else. So our main study becomes that of exploring ourselves in relationship to loving. In my experience of myself, it comes to a point where the first priority is that alignment in myself. So when I look at presence, there's a quality to it that is complete, in that the loving is whole. It's not a static state, because in that state, I'm also grounded. When I drop down into my heart, into the connection to earth, into connection to life, I'm anchored. That groundedness is not an isolation. That is in relationship to life. In that presence, I'm also engaged with my soul. I'm transcended to the form of life. So I'm accessing loving. It's transcendent. So the loving is in me and all around me. So nothing exists that is not in the loving, in perspective to my outlook. I'm going to suggest it's that way for all of us, whether we think so, believe so, or feel so. How do you approach that? Consider the possibility, accept that it's possible. But I have all this experience to the contrary. No, all that evidence is interpreted by you to mean a certain thing. So that's just the way you think it, the way it is. In the transformative perspective, all those segmented pieces or contrary pieces are resources to inform you. There's some aspect of consciousness that will take you into a more complete sense of loving. When you treat them as information rather than identity, and move into appreciation, which is and gratitude, which is an act of loving, so they will reveal to you what you need to integrate, what you need to resolve, what you need to rehabilitate, what you need to restore within yourself. So in the leading, in the educating, in the pursuing organizational objectives, all of these activities are in service to you learning about the loving. When you do that, you become an agent of enabling the loving to be present in this world, in this reality, more so than was there before. You don't even have to master this, you just have to take each day and look at it from this perspective. And allow that what you don't understand is not who you are. In other words, nothing defines you, just the loving. I was talking to a student recently that we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, but I still feel like something is missing. And so I suggested that, well, we're living in a very dynamic time in which there's a lot of people shifting out of a fear-based reality. A lot of people are catching on to the collaborative, loving process, that dialogue is a much more effective way to move through situations than, domination and fear and coercion and threats and those kind of dynamics. We're moving into a time, in other words, which humanity has not experienced before. So in your opening to your wholeness, you're beginning to sense that humanity is moving into new territory that it hasn't been in before. So, what happens? Well, we've been practicing. We've been moving into situations again and again that seem new to us. And what finally resolved them was something within us that produced what was needed. Because this is the real key. That as we move forward into these times, because of our primordial linkage with the loving, with the wholeness, this gives us access to a consciousness that is that ultimate reflexivity in which the unknown need generates the needed response. There's this capacity to, in complete love, to respond with what is needed to what is needing it. So I suggested to her that in her practice thus far, she become aware of that place, that frontier. And so what she wasn't quite accustomed to or recognizing was that it was not her personally, not her egoically, that needed to supply the response. Her egoically just needed to hold to the presence. The presence collaborates with the response that is needed. The ego observes the response and is taught what to do. And so that's the educational process of the transformational leader.